Hi there, I'm Denise Richardson from Howdini.com, and we're talking about kids throwing tantrums today. Couldn't possibly have a better guest than Pleshette Murphy, who's the author of The 7 Stages of Motherhood and a parenting contributor to Good Morning America. Does every child at some point throw a tantrum?
You know, that's a really good question. They certainly are very ubiquitous in the toddler years. I mean, there's a reason they call it the terrible twos, and it's because at that age, they don't have the verbal skills to express what they want. Just imagine how incredibly frustrating it is to have somebody making all of the decisions for you basically 24/7, to very rarely get your own way about anything. And then when you do want it, to not really be able to say it. And if you're tired and you're hungry to boot, you're going to have a meltdown. So the toddler years are a big time for tantrums, but they can persist into the preschool years too.
Is there a predictability? Is there a pattern in building?
Sometimes, but you know, parents cannot fault themselves if they don't catch it in time. You know, there are obvious times when you need to be paying attention, as in, you know, end of the day, the child's exhausted, you're trying to get them to bed. That may be a real primo tantrum time, or before dinner, or even when they have to make transitions, or you're telling them that you have to leave the playground and they don't want to. I mean, there may be times where they become so overwhelmed and so frustrated, and if you can predict it and of course prevent it by distracting your child or giving them a heads up before you take them out of the playground, or warning them that it's going to be bedtime and having a routine that you stick to, you know, those can go a long way to preventing tantrums, but they're almost unavoidable.
You know, Annie, right now some parent is watching and they're saying, well, yeah, that happened when my kid was small, but I've got a teenager now, and they go wacko on me sometimes.
You know, it's a little different in the teen years, although we now know that very similar things are happening to kids' brains when they're toddlers and when they're teens. They're going through this amazing growth spurt, and parts of their brain that have to do with their emotions and their impulses grow much faster than the brakes. So for teenagers, often what happens is that, and they're very emotional because of course there are all these hormones coursing through their veins. So for girls, for example, you know, the meltdown about the shirt that didn't get in the laundry in time, and she's having a tantrum, and you can't believe it. She really, in some ways, can't help it. It absolutely is that upsetting to her.
Tantrum 101, how do they prevent it? How do they respond to it, even into the teenage years? And you've got adults who are acting out like kids as well.
Well, you know, that's a really important point, because one of the most important things we now know is, and I think that a lot of parents are aware of, is that it takes two to tango in almost any of these situations. And if you can maintain your cool, you're the grown-up here. You know, it's very hard sometimes. You can find that you kind of get drawn into a child's tantrum. It's often very hard not to lose your cool, and if you feel that you are going to get very angry or respond by spanking your kid or doing something that you're later going to regret, and that certainly isn't going to stop the tantrum, take a time out yourself.
In public places, the parent oftentimes grabs the kid by the arm. If you keep that up, I'm going to spank you, and whacks the kid. How do you respond in a public place?
My advice to parents, you know, if you're on the plane or if you're in the supermarket and your kid has a tantrum, your job is to say to yourself, I don't know these people. I'm never going to see these people again.
Yeah.
I have to be there for my child, because if you can't stand by your child's side in those situations, they're going to pick up on it. And as you point out, it's just going to get worse.
It's interesting you said on a plane, because I've had that experience, and I've thought to myself, that parent must feel so embarrassed.
Yeah.
When you get on with a child to a flight, should you say, look, I apologize in advance for any noise?
Oh, you mean to the other people?
To the other people on the plane?
Yeah, I mean, I carry this in my purse. I call it my tantrum tamer. I mean, I actually have it to help other parents, because I find that one of the things that's amazing to me is how little support parents get when a kid is having a meltdown. Instead of leaning over and saying, boy, I know this is really hard, don't worry about it. You know, everybody crosses their arms and kind of goes like that, the way, you know, we've seen everybody do. And I think that we've got to cut parents a break, and even kids, when they're in a situation, especially when they're being watched, it can just make it worse.
You know something, I believe everybody needs a cheerleader, and you're a great cheerleader for parents.
Thanks.
And Pleshette Murphy, thank you very much for being with us.
Great to be here.